Hey there. Up to this point, if you've seen any of my TTRPG videos, you've mostly seen me talking about D&D or Tales of the Valiant, as I said in my previous video for Pathfinder Secrets of the Unlit Star. However, Cosmere's 3-action economy, combined with a desire to get back to my science fiction roots, led me to check out Starfinder 2nd Edition. Because I like having both the PDF and the physical book, I ended up doing some Paizo subscriptions, and that gets me the PDF for free. The first Starfinder subscription item I got was Tales from the Vast. As a newbie to Paizo, one of the first things I've read a lot is that Paizo is known for year-long adventure paths that can sometimes take players all the way to level 20, which is a rarity in the TTRPG space. Usually, whenever I see an adventure path, it will take you from level 1 to maybe about level 12 when we're talking about D&D or Tales of the Valiant. I don't know if they've always treated Starfinder differently, or if I'm jumping in as Paizo is changing their strategy, but this book is an anthology rather than one adventure that goes all the way through. Now, I do know there have been some changes recently, such as going, instead of doing monthly adventure paths, making them quarterly to save money on shipping, especially overseas. So maybe that's part of it. Maybe Starfinder's always been different, or maybe just this particular book is different. This one just goes from level 1 to level 9. This is the third published adventure for Starfinder 2nd Edition, not counting the Starfinder Society or the playtest materials. The first one was Murder in Metal City, which is a deluxe one-shot. I'm very excited to play that with the folks that I did Cosmere with. We're going to do that in about 2 weeks, and I'll probably make a video with my impressions after I'm done with that. The second one was Guilt of the Grave World, which features Zoe and a reality TV plotline for at least part of it. I already own the PDF for that, and if my players like Murder in Metal City, we'll be jumping into that one. And so Murder in Metal City is just a one-shot that takes you from level 1 to maybe level 2. Guilt of the Grave World is I believe, level 1 through 5 adventure, which is pretty neat, and it'll also not have pre-gens. Both of those take place in the Pact Worlds. The Pact Worlds roughly being the solar system that Pathfinder and Starfinder take place in, where Galarian is in the Pathfinder universe and Absalom Station is in the Starfinder future of the Pathfinder universe. What's interesting is that this third adventure takes place in the Vast, the equivalent of being way out beyond Pluto in our solar system. There's also the concept of near space. This is even further out than near space. This anthology-style book has 4 adventures in here, each covering 3 levels of player advancement. Interestingly, compared to other TTRPG anthologies I've purchased, there are instructions in here for running this as one campaign taking place in the Vast, or you could run it as 4 one-shot campaigns. That's a first for me, hearing one-shot and campaign in the same sentence like that, but it does convey pretty well what they mean. From here on in, there'll be spoilers, and I'll put a timestamp to skip to. If you don't want spoilers, that'll take you to the end in my conclusions. One thing I want to do is show off the credits. I saw the YouTube channel The Gaming Gang do that, and I think that's a great thing to do because there's a lot of people involved in making a TTRPG adventure, and I'd like for them to get credit for what they did. The first adventure, Expedition to the Drowned Planet, takes place in Casmerg's Absurdity. Not having played Starfinder 1st Edition, all I know from the Galaxy Guide is that it's a region of space where the drift doesn't work, and exploration requires slightly lower tech methods like using maps. The drift is Starfinder's answer for faster than light travel. Essentially, you go into a different dimension that gives you a shortcut to somewhere else, and you pop out in a different location. Not unlike Cosmere's cognitive realm, and I've read that in some other sci-fi books as a way to make faster than light travel work within the understanding that we have of the laws of physics. I don't know what the inspiration of the writers of this adventure is, but it definitely seems to have themes of colonialism, but in space. More recent scholarship of the pre-Columbian Americas reveals that, for example, the forests of the Northeast USA were pretty young. The people who got here from Europe thought, oh wow, look at this old forest, but it actually had been cut down and grown back in the last few hundred years. Between some archaeology, research into oral traditions, and other methods, it's pretty clear that just before the Europeans really started arriving en masse, something, probably a pandemic, wiped out huge portions of the North American peoples, and they were still reeling from the consequences of that. In short, if they had arrived a few hundred years earlier, they might have come across the North American equivalent of the Incan or Aztec Empire. Additionally, the fact that the players in this adventure are meant to think that they're arriving at an uninhabited planet or an uncontacted planet echoes a lot of the assumptions made by Europeans who were discovering these people for the first time, but didn't know about their trade routes as well now, the same way that we do in the past. One last thing that struck me as potentially inspired by history. Modern history shows that as much as Europeans were making use of ancient rivalries to pit tribes against each other, the North American inhabitants were using the Europeans to take out their rivals and get access to horses and gunpowder. So each one was kind of using the other side. As a segue into the adventure itself, one of the first things that the characters have to do is deal with a warship from the Imher Virtuum. I'm not sure how you pronounce that empire's name. Again, the Pact Worlds, where the characters are coming from, are ignorant of the wilderness, and there's a whole conquest going on this supposedly uncharted planet. This early part of the adventure focuses on social encounters like diplomacy, and depending on the outcome of the social encounter, there's a victory point system section. This also reminds me of the Cosmere and its use of point systems to get through cinematic scenes. So finding a way to give some gaminess to things, but not making it play out as long form as you would if you had to fight and have every single encounter. So I think that works pretty well. Once the players arrive on the planet, there's a hexploration mode as they try and find a good place to make a camp. There's also creature battles with local non-sentient creatures. Eventually, the players meet the local inhabitants, and there are further social interactions and battles. The climax involves helping the locals deal with some separatists who've chosen an unfortunate area for their new town. This leads to a dungeon crawl section. So it reminds me a lot of that SNL skit, "This adventure has everything." It's got social encounters, victory point sections, hex crawls, dungeon crawls, fights. It's a great adventure that should keep your table from getting bored, as it should have a little bit of something for each person. The second adventure is called the Moonside 250 Terror, and it's meant to be a horror campaign. This adventure combines some themes of corporate raiders, that being the 80s term for hedge funds, a rest stop chain that reminds me of the Destination Rest Area Buc-ee's, and a Twilight Zone episode. As the players explore the first chapter, there's definitely a feeling like the game BioShock. There isn't really anybody around. You're kind of coming across different artifacts, pictures, the way things are arranged, and that's kind of giving you an idea of what might have happened here. Eventually, you come across a monster that's meant to up the scare factor. For me, this monster was just haunted house vibes. Some of the younger folks on Reddit said that it had some Five Nights at Freddy's vibes. So I guess your mileage may vary based on how old you are and what your exposure is to different bits of pop culture. Continued exploration as you're going through the adventure maintains the haunted house, haunted spaceship vibe. You come across lots of empty rooms or rooms filled with ghosts of the dead. Your players still don't know what's going on, but each new discovery reveals just how wrong things have become in here. They should be getting more and more a feeling of like, what have we stepped into? Eventually, they come across other humans and see that the folks who aren't dead yet have gone nuts. This section and the scenario as a whole have a lot of commentary about hyper-capitalism. There's definitely a strain of this critique of hyper-capitalism throughout Starfinder as a whole. I think that's probably at least a little bit mentioned in Abadar Corp, which is a whole corporation dedicated to the god of commerce. There are the crazy things happening on Triaxis and I think on Akaton. But I've also started to see lots of actual plays, whether they're Paizo or D&D based, tackling this theme. It's definitely something that's in the air in general. There's also an encounter in here using the influence system. Between the time that I wrote the script for this video and when I'm recording it, I happen to have seen a video by Ginny D about using Draw Steel's conversation system to make the conversations work a little more seamlessly, or a little. So right now in D&D, you basically give a speech, then you roll a dice for persuasion or intimidation, and depending what the dice do, the character's convinced or not. And so that kind of almost negates everything you said, depending, if your GM is just running it straight that way, or it might make it so that the GM rewards players who are naturally more convincing versus the players who aren't. And so Draw Steel has this point system where you're moving someone closer towards what you want, not just a binary yes or no. And so the influence system kind of works like that. And Cosmere's conversation system has a similar idea to it, where you're like wearing down their resolve. As players move into the final chapter, a timer of sorts may come into play if they don't have the ability to protect themselves from radiation. That would just depend on what kind of armor they happen to have or what type of creatures they are. Once they shut off the power, there's another clock running to get everyone out in time. The third scenario takes place on Salvation's End. This planetoid gives me strong Portal 2 vibes. There's an AI running hundreds of experiments in individual chambers. Each of those chambers seem to function like Star Trek's holodecks. This planet also kind of gives me some similarities to Brandon Sanderson's The Grand Machine. We've only heard a little bit about that in one of his novellas, but it sounds like a very similar idea. The exploration of a newly opened vaults being these chambers, and the warning given to players during the brief makes me think of First Contact story, like Star Trek. Like they warn you, hey, these people don't know they're in a simulation, be careful how you talk to them. Your players' characters have to catalog the biomes in this vault and collect samples from water, forest, and cave systems. And the section that they're exploring, the town, has the players building relationships, as in Stardew Valley or Harvest Moon. And in fact, page 92 in this book's sidebar acknowledges the influence of these types of games. And it's even capped off with a town festival and everything, so very strong Stardew Valley vibes. Chapter 2 of this adventure has the AI escalating its experiments to try and see how the inhabitants react to disaster. There's also some crazy things that happen in this chapter that I really don't want to spoil. And then finally, Chapter 3 includes 2 clocks. Now, I believe I read about the ideas of using clock systems in a Kobold Press blog, but I wish more adventures included them as a way to guide GMs in having a sense of urgency and tension. TTRPGs can suffer the same fate as JRPGs, CRPGs, or any story-based game that has a bit of a sandboxy nature, where you have this big imminent disaster. Oh my god, this asteroid's about to hit the planet or something huge like that. But at the same time, somehow there's enough time to do as many side quests as you want, go help this person find that or whatever. It kind of destroys a bit of what's happening in the story. So the clock system fixes this by allowing flexibility. You're not depending on an actual clock because, of course, the gaminess of the system and rolling dice, you don't want to have an actual clock. So certain events would move the clock forward, and when it reaches the end, time's up and something happens. Maybe something good if they succeeded, something horrible if they failed. And then it's important for the GM to communicate to the players that the clock is ticking down. It's up to you and your table how much you reveal the mechanics behind the curtain, but there should be a sense of like, uh-oh, it's getting closer to your time. Oh, it's getting closer to your time, so that they understand that there's a sense of urgency to what they're doing. The fourth and final adventure takes place in the Vast, on a planet that's being attacked by the Aslanti Empire. This adventure seems to eschew a lot of the absurdity of the first 3 adventures. On the one hand, this means that if you're a table that's playing all 4 adventures as one campaign, you get to have a little bit of everything. On the other hand, it could be interpreted as whiplash by your table, because the first few adventures will allow you to be a little silly, and then this one is a pretty serious feeling to it. In an echo, or in conversation with the first adventure from this anthology, the planet's inhabited by a people who've chosen to abandon tech and live simply. So they used to have the ability to go from planet to planet, and now they've decided they're going to get rid of all that and just pretend they're an agrarian society. I believe it's been a few generations, so only some of the people know what's going on, but maybe the kids don't. And the players are summoned to the planet by a distress signal, and so they come to help. What's really well written about this adventure is that the players are given a lot of choices in how much they want to help the oppressed. I mean, there's no adventure if they simply abandon the planet or choose not to help at all, but there are degrees of help, and so they still have agency and helps the story feel more real. Eventually, unless the players completely abandon the plot, they're fully integrated into the rebel forces. The end of Chapter 2 presents several missions for the players to engage in for the rebels. So basically, there's a bunch of skill checks, and then if you fail the skill check, there's a battle. The book suggests this might take place over many sessions, but it's going to depend on whether the players are lucky or unlucky. If they're mostly lucky, it seems like as written, it would go by really fast. If they're unlucky and they have to do a lot of battles, I could see it taking a couple sessions. Up until now, the book has been holding the hand of the GM, so I'm not sure if they're expecting the players to do lots of role play, and that's why it's going to take a lot of sessions, or if they're leaving room for the GM to use the victory point system from the GM core. I haven't run the adventure myself, so it's hard for me to say whether or not this would take multiple sessions. Overall, the plot of this adventure has a lot of similarities to Season 2 of Andor, the Star Wars TV show. But given how long it takes TTRPG books to be written, it's most likely a coincidence. They're just both telling a serious story in a science fantasy setting involving an evil empire and thoughts of fascism. I don't think they copied each other. I think they just happen to come out kind of back to back. This adventure has cinematic space battles for the first time in this anthology. There's tons of them in Guilt of the Grave World, so if your players like that, that's really cool. And cinematic space battles, basically think of the game FTL, the video game, where you have people at different stations, and then that gives your ship ability to do different things. There's regular combat, good opportunities for roleplay, and that's that adventure. The book itself concludes with potential plot hooks to keep things going. Some of them lead back to the different adventures you would have played in this book. One of them goes to, I believe, the next Starfinder adventure path, which is Secrets of the Swarm. And so it's pretty well written. The last couple things I want to say about this book, the gutter images have some real Ren and Stimpy vibes to them. There's a lot of GM tips in this anthology. I don't know if that's a Paizo thing. I don't know if it's because it's early on in Starfinder's life cycle, but compared to D&D and Kobold Press, I don't remember seeing so many tips to help GMs run things. I think this should help anyone who's nervous about being a GM for the first time get a lot out of this anthology. Overall, I think it's definitely worth picking up. I think it's worth playing. Like I said, it kind of covers every type of thing you might want to do, so it'll keep everybody in your table from getting bored. And I would definitely suggest it. All right, I'll see you guys next time. Bye.